right, we're ready to begin Basics of Biblical Hebrew, chapter 15, which is the call imperfect paradigm. Yeah. So we'll start off with Hebrew insights, and we'll go over the workbook, see if there's any questions. We'll go over the translations, since those aren't in the answer key. And then we'll cover the chapter 15, call imperfect, strong verbs, paradigm, and vocabulary. So for the Hebrew insight, just want to talk about New Testament names. Some Old Testament places and names have obvious Hebrew meanings. For instance, we have Beit Shemesh, the house of the sun, or we have Beit Lechem, the house of bread, or Beit Rimon, which would be the house of the pomegranate. Those are all really straightforward. There's places and people we know from the New Testament, but because of going from Hebrew to Aramaic to Greek and then to English, the name is sometimes, the origin of the name is sometimes obscured. For instance, Gethsemane. I grew up with hearing the name of the place on the Mount of Olives, Gethsemane. Well, in Hebrew, it's Gat Shemanim. Gat Shemanim. Gat is a press. It could be a wine press or an oil press, and Shemanim is oils. Press of the oils is what it means. And that makes perfect sense, being on the Mount of Olives, that they would have an oil press there. And so that's why it's called Gethsemane, Gat Shemanim. And then Magdala, where the place where Mary Magdalene was from, it originally was Migdal El, the Tower of God. And then Gennesaret was Gennesar. That's a garden. Gon is a garden, and Sar would be prince. So it's the garden of a prince. Capernaum is actually Kafar Nahum, and Kafar is a village, and Nahum is the name of the prophet Nahum. So it was the village of Nahum. And then this one's not too much of a revelation to us. Hashiloach. Salom, we know it as that in John chapter 9, the sent. As you can see, Shalach there for sent. And then Judas Iscariot. Judas comes from Judah, the name Judah, but then Iscariot is Ish-Kiriot. Ish is man, Kiriot is villages, man of the villages. And then Thomas is Ta'am, and that means twin. And then sometimes says the word Didymus is listed there because that's the Greek word for twin. So it's just some examples of a little bit more insight to the names of the places that we've known from our New Testament reading. So getting to the workbook, or was there any questions? Were there any questions? Okay, are there any questions about the workbook, chapter 14? So this would be the call perfect weak verbs. You probably noticed that some of them, like the English to Hebrew, is not too hard because they're on the previous page where you went from Hebrew to English. For instance, the first one, number one, this is on page 54. The woman went to the temple. If you go back just a page 53, and look at number 3, you see Halka Aisha El Hekal. The woman went to the temple. So she went, the woman, to the temple. So anyway, and so far, there's 2 more of those like that. Not that I'm trying to get you to cheat, just by going back and forth between 2 pages. But, okay, if there's no questions, let's go ahead and look at the Bible translations. So looking at number 1, which comes from Exodus 18:11, we have atah. When you see atah with an ayin, that means now. If it was with an aleph, it's still pronounced atah. That would be you talking to a man. But this one is now. Now I know that great Yahweh, so when you say Yahweh is great, something like that, from all, but this would be the comparative men, so we'd say more than all the gods. Now I know that Yahweh is great. We can supply a to-be verb in there. Yahweh is great. Because great is an adjective, it comes before the noun, so it's in the predicate position, so we'll supply a to-be verb. Yahweh is great, more than all the gods. Number 2, which comes from Genesis 21:26. Not I know who he made, or he did. Let's go with he did the thing, this one. Not I know who he did the thing, this one. Or who did this thing. Devar, we normally think of it being a word, but it is sometimes used for a thing. And that carries over into Greek too. Even sometimes it's used for like an account or something like that. Number 3, coming from Genesis 27:2. Behold, please, I am old, not I know the day of the death of me. Why did I say the day of the death of me? Because death of me, that's a pronominal suffix at the end that makes it definite. And then that construct package, Yom Moti, it becomes the day of the death of me. Behold, please, I am old, not I know the day of the death of me. Number 4 from Genesis 6:8. And Noach, he found favor or grace in the eyes of Yahweh. Number 5 from Exodus 6:12. Behold, the sons of Israel, not they listened to me. Number 6, which comes from Deuteronomy 4:44. And this, the law, and here again, we're going to say that that's in the predicate position, this is, and so we're going to supply a to-be verb. We'll say, and this is the law, which he put, Moshe, you got the verb first and then the subject, so Moses put to the face of, but it's actually better translated before the sons of Israel. So I'll run through that again. And this is the law which Moses put before the sons of Israel. Number 7, coming from Genesis 6:13. And he said, again, we have the verb and then the subject, God. So God said to Noach, the end of all flesh, it came before me that she was full, the land or the earth, of violence, full of violence. The land or the earth was full of violence. Hamas is violence. Number 8, which comes from Joshua 1:5. Just as I was with Moses, I will be with you. Notice that I will be, that's what we're going to be studying today. The yea, that aleph on the front, that's a preformative for a perfect. And we're going to translate that in the future. I will be with you. So that's kind of a preview of coming attractions in this lesson. Number 9 comes from Jonah 3:10, and he saw the God. So that's again verb, subject, order. So God, and God saw the work of them, that they returned from the way of them, the evil one. So they returned from their evil way. Okay, any questions? All right. So we'll move on then to chapter 15, the call imperfect strong verbs. Now, in the call perfect, we were looking at suffomatives. Everything, well, except for the third masculine singular, has a suffomative to tell you the person, gender, number. But for the imperfect, every one of them is going to have a preformative. It comes in front of the word. Now, half of them are going to have sufformatives as well. They always have a preformative. Some of them will have a sufformative. We'll look at that in detail. So, objectives, we want to understand the meaning of call imperfect. What does it mean when we say call imperfect? We need to be able to memorize the call imperfect strong verb paradigm. We need to learn to parse call imperfect verbs. And we also will look at the particles, the negative particles, lo and all. So what does it mean when we say call imperfect? Well, we know that the stems tell us the type of action, whether it's simple, causative, or intensive, and it tells us the voice. Active is the subject doing it. Passive is it happening to the subject, or reflexive, that the subject is acting upon or on behalf of themselves. And call is going to be active, simple action. That's what we're looking at. We'll get to all these others. In fact, I'm going to mention some of these later on. These derived, they call these the derived stems, because these are all based or built off the call. They're derived from the call. So call means it's active. It means the subject's doing it. It's a simple action. So whatever it was, he went, he ate. It's just simple action. Now, this is a review from chapter 13 as we looked at the call perfects. We take a root like the kof, tet, lamed, stem, or not stem, but rather the root. And from that, we make the call stem. We add comets and a patak to it, and we get katal, which means he killed. And then we will have the derived stems, which we're not going to go into in detail, but they're all based off of, if you look through here, you can see katal in every one of these. Now there's an extra vowel here, but it's easy to see that this is all built off of that stem that still has to do with, since this is he killed, it still has to do with killing, but this would be he was killed, because that's going to be passive. This is going to be he caused to kill, he was caused to kill, that sort of thing. That's when we get into these derived stems. But that's for a future date. But the reason why I bring it up, so why do you bring it up? This is all future date. Because all of these stems will use the same paradigms, the call perfect and the imperfect. The subformatives for the perfect, the preformatives and subformatives for the imperfect, those will be the same in every single one of these derived stems. You don't have to memorize a paradigm for every one of those stems. This is why the guy that taught me to read Hebrew, he says when you learn Hebrew, you start off crying and end up laughing. And you start off crying because the alphabet is difficult to learn, and you have all these vowel points and the pronunciation things with the shva and all that. And then you have we had like the call perfect paradigm, we have to memorize that, and then the call imperfect paradigm that we're going to present today, and you have to memorize that. And it can seem like a lot. And it's unfortunate that sometimes people get about to this point and they go, oh, this is just too hard, I'm going to give up. And they're just at the verge of ending up laughing. We are just really, really close to the place where you can say, okay, I've got all the big things behind me. From here on, after we learn the call imperfect, from here on, most everything else is a variant of some kind. But the preformatives for the imperfects, then the subformatives for the imperfects, and the subformatives for the perfect, those don't change. We're going to use them for the rest of the book. So that's why these two paradigms must be memorized, because you're going to use it when we're studying default and you want to see, what's the person gender number. It's going to be the exact same subformatives or preformatives and subformatives together that we are memorizing here in the call. So we're on the verge of getting easier here. Okay, so now we've talked about the root, and we've talked about the stem. That's the call stem, katal, he killed. What we're looking at specifically now are the conjugations. Okay, so and we'll continue to look at the different conjugations. Even the rest of the conjugations are somewhat of a variant. But the call perfect, that's what we studied in chapter 13, and then we looked at the weak verbs in chapter 14. Today we're going to be looking at the imperfect. Those are two of the conjugations, perfect and imperfect. And these are the paradigms that must be learned. So we looked at perfect. Now we're going to study the imperfect. So when we referred to call perfect, it was call still means an active simple action. That didn't change. Perfect meant completed action. So we normally translated it with a past tense. It was a completed action. So we have katal, he killed. So past tense, we rendered as a past tense. Now, for the call imperfect, that's incomplete action. It's still, call is still the same, still active simple action. Still the subject doing the action is still just a simple action, but now it's incomplete. And so we have yiktol, which still has to do with killing, but now we'll say he will kill. This is the preformative right here, this yik. That tells us that this is a third masculine singular. But it's still katul, still kill. Now it's he will kill. He will kill. It's not a completed action. It's something yet to be done. Or it could be something going on at the time. You know, you could refer to writing, and it could be that he is writing present tense, and that's still an incomplete action, or he will write, and that's a future incompleted action. But most of the time, we're going to translate it with a future tense in English. Hebrew conjugations are not strictly tenses. In fact, I just flatly say that tenses, Hebrew doesn't have tenses. They primarily indicate aspect, which is how the action is being viewed. Is it being viewed as being a completed action or an incompleted action? Incomplete action can occur in the past, in the present, or in the future. So we have in the past, she was running. That kind of gives us it doesn't tell us she ran, just that it happened. This gives us more of a continual action type thing. She was running. We don't know much about the start or the finish of it. Or we say she used to run, which would be she ran, and then later she ran, then she ran again. So that'd be a repetitive type thing. It's still an incomplete action. She's still looking at it as incomplete action. Or present, she is running, or she runs. Again, she is running gives us more of a continual action. She runs could be a periodic thing, a repetitive thing. Or it could just be looking at the fact that that we're talking about individual runs or something like that. And in the future, she will run. So incomplete action can occur in the past, present, and future. By and large, for the most part, when we come to an imperfect, we're going to go with a future. Incomplete action can also be real or potential. So incomplete action, she will run, translating in the future, which is what we're mostly going to do. But there will be times by context that we're going to say she could run, she should run, she might run, she can run. Sometimes there's potential in it. That's a context issue. Again, most of the time we're going to go with a future she will run. Hebrew conjugation is not strictly tenses. They primarily indicate aspect. Imperfect verbs are normally translated into English with a future tense. She will run. Now, there's the little star there is that there's something we'll be studying in chapter 17. We're not going to worry about that right now, but you'll see that, I just call that the opposite zone, and we'll just leave it at that till we get to chapter 17. But for now, for chapters 15 and 16, we're just going to go with a future tense translation, as in she will run. So that's what a call imperfect is. Now we want to work out the strong verb paradigm. And so that's on page 156 and 15.3. I happen to have it right here, though, so we don't have to turn there in the book. We will be turning the book here shortly. But you can see that every single form has a preformative in the imperfect. And half of them, 6 of them, have a subformative as well. Most of those subformatives are in the plural zone here. Only one of them, second feminine singular, has a subformative, but all of them have preformatives. All right. Now that's the way it's presented in the book, in the 3-2-1 sequence. 3-2-1 singular, 3-2-1 plural. And if that works for you, you can just learn it out of the book and that'll be fine. In fact, we should just go through it and say yiktol, tiktol, tiktol. Yes, these two are the same. We'll talk about that later. Tiktali, ektol. That's a segol there. I'll move that line so you can see it. Ektol. Yiktalu, tiktolna, tiktalu, tiktolna. Yes, this one and this one are the same. And niktol. But that's not the way I memorized them. I memorized them in the 1, 2, 3 order. It's just easier for my brain to do it. I'm maybe too simple-minded. Whatever, use whichever one works best for you. We still have the list of preformatives. We still have the sum with subformatives. That hasn't changed. We only changed the sequence. But it was necessary for me to memorize it this way. So let's go through it again. Ektol, tiktol, tiktali, yiktol, tiktol, niktol, tiktalu, tiktolna, yiktalu, tiktolna. All right. And this is when I recite one, just like driving on the road in the car or something. I'll run through both the call perfect and the imperfect in my head just to keep them fresh in my head. Okay, we talked about the second masculine singular and the third feminine singular are both tiktol. They have the same form. But the context will always let you know what you need. You're either telling a man to do something or saying that a man is doing something or will do something, I guess would be the right way to say that. It's either going to be obvious from the context that it's man or that it's, so it's you will kill, or it's going to be third feminine singular, she will kill. The context will always make it very clear. I've never seen a time where you had it and you go, well, it could go either way. It's pretty straightforward. And then also the second feminine plural and third feminine plural are the same form. And again, context will always make that clear whether you're saying you, all, talking to women, or whether it's referring to women, they will kill. It's always easy to tell from the context which way to go with that. And just looking at some things here, notice that the first vowel is always a heroic, except for the first one here, ectol for the first common singular. It's got a segol, but all the rest of them have a heroic. And then all of these tav performatives have dageshes. That's also good to see what remains the same. And then all of them have holem vavs except for the second feminine singular. There's no, I'm not holem vav, I just a holem vowel, So the second feminine singular, the second masculine plural, and the third masculine plural, we have a vocal schwa there instead of a o vowel. But the rest of them have o vowels. So it's just, that's kind of the 30,000-foot view of it. Call imperfect strong verb paradigm must be memorized. Again, you'll find it on 15.3. I can send out, I have a PDF that has it in the 1, 2, 3 order that I used. And so I'll send that out to everybody. The good news is that all imperfect verbs, now we're talking about the derived stems and the derived stems, so like nefal and hefil and hofel, pl, pual, heat palel, all of the derived stems, and there's other derived stems besides those. Those are the major ones. They all use the same preformatives and subformatives. So once you memorize these, going forward, we're going to be looking at variations and things, but you'll always be able to tell, always be able to tell what the person, is it second person, third person, the gender, if that's masculine or feminine or common, and number, is it singular, is it plural. You can tell whatever you're looking at, even before we even study those other derived stems, you'll be able to look at the word and say, well, I don't know what happened to the word, but I can tell that this is a third masculine singular or third masculine plural or something. You'll be able to tell by just looking at the preformatives and subformatives. So that's why it's important to get this into your head. We're going to be using it the rest of the time. Now, I do want to turn to page 157. Because we have a chart of different words. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, well, we're actually, I want to go to 154. I'm a little ahead of myself. I apologize. Um, but for the diagnostics, okay, this is the yeet toll. That's the third masculine singular. Remember, we just had katal. We had katal. And that's third masculine singular. That was perfect. For the imperfect, it's still third masculine singular. That's the diagnostic. Also want to talk about the noon paragogicum. Paragogicum. Basically, it's a noun that just gets thrown in. So here's yeek to loo. We have a preformative. We have a subformative. This is a third masculine plural. They killed, or they will kill. They will kill. Okay, there it is. They will kill. Now, sometimes you'll end up with this noun paragogicum. It just slips in there. It doesn't change anything. As far as meaning is concerned, it doesn't. We get a noun ending to it, but we still have the U vowel there. We have the kibbutz, or we have the shirik. It's still pronounced, either one of those still pronounced the same way. Yiktaloon, but we don't really account the noon for anything in the meaning. We're basically still looking at this preformative and, well, that subformative there. Like this preformative, this subformative. And that's used about 320 times with the second masculine plural, third masculine plural forms. You can get that noon dropping in or dropping out. There's also an energic hey or something that pops in every once in a while. But again, it doesn't change the subformative. It just makes it look a little different. You need to be aware of it. Okay, here's where I was. That's still not right. That says 158. Oh, no, that is, I'm in the wrong place. Chapter 15 is really not all that big of a chapter. The big thing is learning this paradigm. But what I wanted to do here on page 158, 15.5, we have a number of words here. We have zakar, he remembered. We have katav, he wrote. Shamar, he kept, he guarded. And then kavatz, he gathered. Okay. So just looking at these words, and if you go down through here, well, let's just look at the first line, I guess. We have the ye preformative. That tells us this is an imperfect, and it's all the way across. There's no change. Second line, we have the third feminine singular. We have the tav preformative, and we have that on every one of these. That's it's exactly the same. Doesn't matter what the word is, the preformative does not change, and subformatives do not change. Second masculine singular, which looks like the third feminine, you just go by context, but we still have that tav preformative in all four columns. Second feminine singular, we have a preformative and a subformative, that Greek yod at the end, but you have that all the way across all four columns. That doesn't change. Then we get to the first common singular, is the aleph on the front. And we have that in all four columns. It doesn't change. The third masculine plural, next line, we see the yod preformative, we see the shirik subformative. And you look at the next column, you see the same preformative, subformative all the way across the other columns. Third feminine plural, we see the tav preformative, we see the na subformative, all the way across all the words. There's no change. The second masculine plural, we see the tav preformative and the shurik subformative, all the way across all four columns. Second feminine plural, it looks like the third feminine plural. Again, go by context, but the preformatives and subformatives are the same all the way across. And then for the first column plural, we have the ni all the way across. That's the first column plural preformative. And that's what I wanted us to see in this, is that once you have this memorized, it's easy to take this paradigm and bring that across to other words. It doesn't matter what the word is, you can look at it. Even if you don't know what the word is, a lot of times you can say, well, I know this is the word. I don't know what the word is, but they are doing it, or he is doing it, or she is doing it, or you all are doing it, or something like that. It's easy to go through and see who's doing it. Okay, now we'll move on to the transitive, intransitive, stative. Now this is, you notice it says chapter 13 at the top, because I just copied the slide over from there. We talked about it then. Transitive verbs may and often do take direct objects, may transmit, like Moses broke the tablets. Okay, the direct objects can be the tablets. Moses broke the tablets. So that would be transitive. Intransitive cannot take direct objects. I don't think it's in the Bible, but Moses spat. That's just there's no direct object with that. And then the stative is a condition. I am old, or I am happy, or something like that. So looking at these individually, here's a call, which is he ate. Again, these are perfects because I just took these out of the perfect slides. Now it could have a direct object. He ate the cheeseburger. It could have something else in there, but it doesn't have to. Just say he ate. It could go either way. Intransitive, we have halak, he walked. And stative, he is great, or it could even be he was great. He was great. And when we say in English, I am old, again, we saw this in chapter 13. Hebrew only needs one word, zakanti. Zakanti. That means I am old. So we have like Gadol, he is great. Kaved, he is heavy. Katon, he is small. And we have different verbs, not verbs, vowels. We have different vowels for these stative verbs. So in the call perfect, we studied the last couple of chapters, you can have a stem vowel of a patak, as in Gadol, he is great. You can have a tsere, as in Zakain, he is old. Or you can have a holam katon, as in he is small. And when it comes to the imperfect, the stem vowel is a patak. So it's Yigdal, he will be great. Yizkan, he will be old. Yiktan, he will be small. So the vowel changes to a patak on every one of those. Okay, so let's look at the stative verb paradigm. It's just across the page on page 159 from what we're looking at. The main thing I want to show you, well, the changes are in red. So you see, for instance, in the first column, the left column, you got pataks going down through there. And then the tsere, sometimes you have pataks. No, you always have pataks. That's right, because we're looking at imperfects. All right. So anyway, the red pataks show you the changes as opposed to like what we had in the perfects, where you had three different classes. The main thing, though, the one you see is that when you're looking at the 3MS, first row, you see the ye at the front of it, the preformative, the yod preformative, that's third masculine singular. It's jump down here to like the second masculine singular. You see the T, T, T on the front, the preformatives. You go down to second masculine plural, third one up from the bottom. You have the T and the U at the end, all the way across. In other words, the preformatives and subformatives don't change. And so once you've memorized the paradigm, you can carry this across to everything else. Okay, for parsing, we have malach. That's, of course, a call perfect. So we'd translate that past tense. He reigned. Looks like king. King would be melech. We'd have two skulls in here. That would be king as a noun. But for a verb, we have the typical comments patak vowel set there. And so for parsing call perfects, this is a call perfect, 3ms. Okay, so call, stem, conjugation, perfect, person, third person, gender, masculine, number, singular, from the lexical form, malach, and the translation is he reigned. Okay. Now, for the imperfect, we have timlok. And this could go two ways. This you'll call in, so call is still the stem, conjugation is imperfect. It's third person, gender is feminine, number is singular. It still comes from malach, he reigned, but this is she will reign if it's third feminine singular. However, the form is exactly the same for the second masculine singular. It could be call imperfect 2ms of malach, which would be translated you will reign, talking to a man because it's masculine. So that's how you parse. So now we want to look at towards the end of the chapter, we talk about low, which means it's a negative particle, and also all, which is another negative particle. Low is way more common. We looked at the same type of statement when we were in chapter 13. So we have katal, which is he killed, which is the verb first. Then we have the subject, Moshe. So Moses killed the Hebrew. Then we put lo in front of it and says not he killed Moses. Not Moses did not kill the Hebrew. And it's looking in the past. Moses did not kill the Hebrew. Now with the imperfect, we have yitol, he will kill. We have the preformative, there's nothing on the back. This is the 3ms, preformative. So he will kill Moses, the Hebrew. Moses will kill the Hebrew. You stick a lo on the front of it, and it becomes Moses will not kill. Notice that it's put to the future because this is an imperfect. This is because past because it's a perfect. The imperfect Moses will not kill the Hebrew. Now this is actually taken from the Ten Commandments. And oftentimes in the New Testament, when it's quoting the Old Testament, when it's quoting one of the commandments, it'll often use a future tense to communicate that, just as a point of reference there. So this is, you shall not murder. This would be the preformative for 2ms. It could be 3fs. It could be she, not she will murder, but the Ten Commandments are pretty consistent. In fact, you would think sometimes that maybe when God was commanding the people, he would just use, he's talking to the whole nation of Israel, you shall not murder. Why didn't he say plural? Why didn't he have a shirk on the end of this for you all will not murder? But it's interesting. I think it's because it doesn't matter what everybody else does. I am responsible for obeying God's commands myself. And I think that he's speaking to each of us as individuals in these things. So anyway, we have this T preformative. It's second masculine singular. And when you have low, this is telling you that this is something that is just an absolute thing. You shall not murder. You shall not murder. It's a prohibition, a permanent prohibition, as opposed to all tira. That's more like a short-term or immediate specific command. Not you will fear. It's still tav preformative. It's still second masculine singular. Not you will fear. So that's how they're used. All and low. And it does make a little bit of difference in the context of what you're reading as to whether it's looking at a broader command or a more immediate specific command. I know this is probably about the third time I've said this, but the call imperfect strong paradigm must be memorized. I hope that doesn't come up as a question. Do we really have to memorize it? Yes, you really do memorize it. And the reason why is because once you've got that memorized, you don't have to memorize any other paradigms after this. You have the call perfect, you have the call imperfect, and those will carry through to all of the derived stems. They use the same preformatives for the imperfects and same subformatives, and then for the perfects, they use the same subformatives. So let's turn to the vocabulary, page 161, 162. 15.10. Kaya, he lived. Basically, it's just what we see there is the lexical form, and the lexical form is going to be the call perfect form. So that's why I say he lived. He lived. Yakol, he is able or was able. He was able. Karat means to he cut. If you think about the call perfect paradigm, the first person common singular is the E ending. And so if you think of karate, if you can think of somebody breaking a board with the edge of their hand, cutting the board as it were, karate. I don't know if it helps you remember the word. It's just a possible memory device. Karat means he cut. Karate means I cut. Sur, turn away, turn aside. If they're working on the sewer, you might want to turn aside to a different way to not have to smell the smell. That's again, if it helps you remember it. Memory devices don't have to be. They can be weird, and it's okay. It helps you remember them. The one thing that's different is if you notice up the he feel out to the side there, if you cause to turn aside, you're actually removing it. And so he feel, oftentimes you just translate it as remove. But we're concentrating on the call. Right now, just learn it as turn aside. Avad, that looks a lot like the noun eved, which means a servant, but this means to serve or to work. So he served or he worked. Ana, he answered. Then we go to some nouns. Ozen, that's the ear. Ozne is in the to the right-hand side there. That's the dual. If you're talking about two ears or the two ears of somebody, you have that yod there. That's the construct. So the two ears of someone or something. Aiel is a ram. The funny thing is, it's also sometimes just referring to a ruler. You just have to go by context to know whether it's a ram or whether it's a ruler. I wonder how that makes me wonder how that came about, why they started calling rams rulers, or rulers rams rather. And then sometimes it's actually used as an adjective for somebody that's strong. And zevak is sacrifice. Chaim is life. If you've watched, as far as I'm concerned, it's the world's greatest musical, because I'm not really into musicals much, but I do like the Fiddler on the Roof. And so they're drinking l'chaim, to life, if that helps you remember that word. Chaim means life, and l'chaim is to life. Next one is tzedakah, righteousness. Notice that you have like an adjective tzedek, and you add that hey to the end of it, becomes a noun. Tzedakah is righteousness. Tzafon is north. Oz, you have to, Oz is where Dorothy went. No, that's not the right one. It means usually then or since. You just have to go by context again to know which way you want to go with that. Off, it's kind of the same way also, but sometimes maybe indeed, but also I'd probably start with that one. Gibor, it means strong. Sometimes Gibor is just used to refer to a man. And then sometimes you see like Gibor and Chayil used together, a mighty man of valor. And so Gibor would be a mighty man, and then Chayil would be the valor. Gibor. Fact is, I think when we were in Israel, I even saw some restrooms marked with Gibor to indicate the men's room. I don't recall looking intently at the women's room to see what they said. I just noticed it as I saw the men's room. Sorry. And then pen, lest. That one's pretty much the way that's used most of the time, lest. Any questions? All right. Then want to make sure that you memorize the call perfect paradigm, whether you use 15.3 or if you go back and look at the video again and see the way that I put it, or like I said, I'll send out a PDF with the first person, second person, third person sequence. That's the way I memorize it. Again, you used whatever works well for you. If you're able to read it or memorize it the way it's in the book, you know it's good to do it the way it's in the book. That's really kind of a standard. I was looking at another grammar earlier, and that's how they do it in that grammar too. I think it's just kind of standard because katal is the lexical form, so they start off with third masculine singular, and that I know it makes sense to me. And then yiktol, that's the third masculine singular, and so they start off with that. That makes sense to me, but when it came to memorizing it, that just didn't work for me. I had to change it around to first, second, third person. So use whatever works for you. You're welcome. It's not important which one you use. It's only important that you know it when you see it, that you know what you're looking at, whether it's a third person masculine singular or whether it's a third person masculine plural or something. You just want to make sure you can recognize it. So memorize the imperfect paradigm, memorize the vocabulary. Go ahead and work on your workbook, exercise 15, and then go ahead and read ahead through chapter 16 because we want to see what happens to the imperfect of the weak verbs. And again, that's going to be kind of a review that we had, like what we had with the call perfect, chapter 14, and which is also basically a review of things that we had learned earlier. Things, what happens when you have a guttural, what happens if you have one of the letters that drops out. It's going to be the same thing. But again, the imperfect paradigm, the preformatives, and if they have subformatives, those will not change. They'll be the same. Any questions? All right, then.